Welcome to Knitted Knockers Part 2. This Knitted Knockers video series is a continuation of Knitted Knockers Part 1. In Part 1, we learned how to cast on our knitted knocker and split it into 3 sections at the bottom for magic loop. We then joined it into the round and worked 1 round in magic loop. In this Part 2, I'll show you how to begin shaping the bottom of your knitted knocker by demonstrating the alternating increase rounds. Here, here, and here. First, I'll demonstrate shaping round 1, which is a 3-stitch increase round. And then I'll demonstrate shaping round 2, which is a 6-stitch increase round. And we'll continue alternating between these 2 rounds. So, here we go. So now we are going to start our shaping rounds. And so you can see now that in Magic Loop, we now have the 3 sections on 2 needles. We have the first 2 sections of 5 stitches separated by a marker. So here's section 1, here's section 2, and the 3rd section of 5 stitches is sitting on the back needle. Section 1, section 2, section 3. And we are going to be doing increases in each of these sections to create this 3-sided shape that makes up the knocker. And so if you look at it this way, we have section 1 and section 2 on one needle. We have section 3 on the back needle, and we're going to be doing increases at each of these points to make this shape. So what that means is in the pattern, you'll notice that on one round we increase 3 stitches, and then on the next round we increase 6 stitches. So the section that we're going to be increasing 3 stitches, those 3-stitch increases will happen at the end of each section. So on section 1, it'll happen on the stitch just before the marker. Section 2, it'll happen at the end of the row. And section 3, it will happen at the end of this row, at the end of each section. That'll increase 3 stitches at the end of each section. The next row will call for increasing 6 stitches. And so that will happen at the beginning and end of each section. So section 1, an increase will happen in the first stitch and in the last stitch before the marker. Section 2, it'll happen in the first stitch after the marker and the last stitch. And section 3, it will happen on the first stitch and also on the very last stitch, which will be a 6-stitch increase. We're going to keep repeating those two rows, 3-stitch increase, 6-stitch increase, 3-stitch increase every round until we reach our desired number of stitches. So let me just show you how that looks. So we're going to start with a 3-stitch increase. To do that, once again, my yarn is oriented on the back needle on the top. I'm going to slide out the back needle. We're going to do a 3-stitch increase, and so that happens at the end of each section. So on this first section before the marker, I'm going to knit to 1 stitch before the marker. That's 1 stitch until I have 1 stitch left before I would have to slip the marker. So there's 4. Here's the stitch before the marker. I'm going to do a knit front back increase in that stitch. To do that, I go and I knit the stitch, but I do not slide it off the left-hand needle. I take my right-hand needle point and I stick it right into the back of the very same stitch, and I knit it again. Now you can see where I had 1 stitch, I now have 2, and I now have 6 stitches in that section. There we go, 1 stitch increased. I slip the marker, and now we have to make an increase at the end of section 2. This is section 2. I knit to the end of section 2 till I have 1 stitch left, which is right here. And again, I do a knit front back. So I stick my needle in, I knit one stitch, but I don't slide it off. Stick it right into the back of the same stitch, knit it again. Now I have added a stitch. I now have 6 stitches in section 2. We're at the end of our needle, and so we're going to again turn this whole thing around, slide that front needle back in, and we're going to do 1 increase in section 3. So once again, making sure my working yarn is sitting on top. Grab it, and we're going to increase 1 stitch at the end of section 3. 1. Here I am at the last stitch, knit, don't slide it off, stick it right back into the same stitch, knit it again. And now I have 6 stitches in section 3. Again, we are simply going to turn this around, keeping our orientation, sliding that front needle back in, and there we go. And so hang with me and I'll show you how to do the increases with increasing 6 stitches. So we now have 6 stitches in each section because we increased 1 stitch in each section, a 3-stitch increase. So now we're going to do a 6-stitch increase. That's going to be increasing 2 stitches in each section, which means we're going to increase at the beginning and end of each section, 6 stitches. So here's how that goes. Slide out our back needle. We're going to immediately increase 1 stitch in section 1 at the beginning. We're going to knit all the way to the end of section 1 till we have 1 stitch left before the marker. And we're going to do another increase. And there we go. So now we have 8 stitches in section 1 because we had 6. We increased 2, that makes 8. Slip the marker. Now we're going to do the same thing in section 2. We're going to increase 1 stitch in the beginning of section 2, just like that. We're going to knit to the end till we have 1 stitch left in section 2. Excuse me, and we're going to increase a stitch in that last one. And now we have 8 stitches in section 2. We're going to turn it, slide our needle back in, and now we're going to do the same thing to the last section 3. We're going to increase a stitch in the beginning and a stitch in the end. So increase, knit to the end till we have 1 stitch left in section 3, and do another increase. And now we have 8 stitches in section 3. So now each section has 8 stitches. 24 stitches. Now we're going to keep repeating those 2 rows. So we slide our front needle back in. Here we are with a double section on the front needle and a single section on the back. Our next round will be increasing just at the end of each section, and then the following round at the beginning and end of each section. If there's a chart in your pattern and it tells you how many stitches you need to increase to according to whatever size you want to make. So you will look in your pattern And you'll just keep repeating these 2 rounds, the 3-stitch increase round and the 6-stitch increase round, until you reach that desired number of stitches. And so I will knit for a bit, and I'll be back on in the next video with sort of a wrap up on how to complete the bottom of the knitted knocker.